Good evening. Welcome. Thank you for joining the Johnny Cleveland podcast. How is everybody tonight? I'm coming to you live on YouTube and Facebook, and we are glad to have you here on a Wednesday evening, March 24th. I believe we talked to you about a week ago. We had our friends and coaches from Kansas. We did our NCAA bracket. And of course, our brackets are busted. All sorts of fun things that happened in the last week. So we're going to dissect that. We're going to first talk about the Sweet 16 and how that all went. And then we're going to look at the Browns free agency frenzy and how that all went. The Browns did very well. And we will finish talking a little bit about Did You Know? So looking forward to that little segment. We're going to talk about the NCAA tournament. And so we're coming to you live from the household, the Suchian household. If you look behind me, if you're watching on Facebook or on YouTube, you can see our lovely group of kids back there. So they're all over, they're scattered all over the place. So right now we are currently in our kitchen area. We'll see who shows up and who does not. But right now we have one kid over here eating. Hopefully they don't. And we have a dog also in the far reaches who hopefully won't bark while we're on air. So glad to have everybody along. This is the Johnny Cleveland podcast. You can reach us at jclevelandpod.com. You also can reach us on Facebook and on Twitter at jclevelandpod. And we also are on Zazzle. We sell all sorts of fun apparel. On Zazzle, you can get coffee mugs and candy jars and T-shirts and all sorts of fun stuff. So we would love for you to purchase those things and help out our podcast. We've been doing this now for about a year, ever since the pandemic hit. I really enjoy doing this part. And I also write for clevelandsportstalk.com. Check them out. They're always great articles. Working on an article about the NCAA and the Sweet 16 right now. So look forward to getting that out to you probably by Friday. And hope you're having a good day. It's a Wednesday evening. It's beautiful here in the Buckeye State. We're in Columbus. And our weather here in Ohio has just been fantastic. You know, I cannot complain. I lived in Kansas for 26 years. And I always enjoyed the sunshine. And boys and girls, we are getting lots of sunshine here in the state of Ohio. Love it. We actually had a little bit of wind today, which reminded me of Kansas, because if you live in Kansas or in Nebraska and any of those great states like Oklahoma, it's always windy. So I don't miss that part of living in Kansas. So glad I'm here in the Buckeye State. But boy, the Buckeyes, they really struggled in their basketball game this last week. They played Oral Roberts. Obviously, Oral Roberts is the Cinderella team going on in the Sweet 16. Small little school there from Tulsa, Oklahoma. Oral Roberts used to play Wichita State, where I lived in Wichita. So I'm a little familiar with Oral Roberts. And, Ohio State, they've got good basketball teams. But let's be fair. I mean, Ohio State is a football school. And it's been interesting the last week listening to various commentators here locally in Columbus, especially, who are trying to sort of downplay what happened with Ohio State. Basically, what happened in the Big Ten. There were 9 teams that were invited to the NCAA tournament this past year, and there's only one that remains, and that's the Michigan, that team from up north, the Wolverines. 1 out of 9 made it. Actually, if you take the Big Ten and you take the Big 12, those teams like Kansas, K-State, Oklahoma State, there were 16 teams invited, and only 2 teams survived to the Sweet 16. So I'm a little annoyed by the commentary, especially by local people here who don't know anything else but Big Ten, sports. They like to basically say this week that, oh, well, our players were tired. Are you kidding me? It's like, we're going to talk a little bit about Sweet 16 here today. And, my daughter played basketball for the University at Buffalo, the Bulls, and the MAC, part of the MAC, teams like Bowling Green, Toledo, Miami of Ohio, Central Michigan. And, those mid-major teams have never gotten their due. I wrote an article for clevesportstalk.com. Check it out. But that same argument stands today. And it's so annoying to hear, especially people that love the Big Ten, like Ohio State, constantly sort of excuse the idea that, oh, our players were tired. Are you, are you kidding me? You're playing a 20-game, 25-game season. I know we've gone through a pandemic and all of the things that have happened in the last year. Obviously, it's affected every team equally. Some teams more than others. But the whole idea of, oh, well, our players were in the Big Ten tournament and they were playing rough and tough, and therefore we should excuse that and make that a reason why they lost to Oral Roberts. Are you kidding me? It's ridiculous. It's absurd. It's crazy. But that's what you get when you get local commentators, especially here in Columbus, who like to say, oh, our Buckeyes, they were just tired. Oh my gosh, I'm tired of it. It's just annoying. So let's look at the Sweet 16. We've got Gonzaga again. They're undefeated. We talked about this last week in our NCAA bracket with our coaches from Kansas, Coach Isaiah, Coach Mark, Coach Chad. We're all there, and Gonzaga, they're undefeated. So that's all. Can they run the table? They could, folks. They could. They got to the Sweet 16 now. They have a game with Creighton, the Creighton Blue Jays, out there from Nebraska. Creighton's a great program. Used to be a mid-major, now part of the Big East. And Creighton is doing well. So it's a 1 versus 5. Obviously, I think I'm going to take Gonzaga here. But Creighton can shoot. They've got shooters, and they play fundamentals, folks. I think that's the biggest thing about mid-majors and the Big Ten. All these folks talk about the Big Ten excusing things and think that the Big Ten and all these Power 5 conferences like the SEC and the ACC are always dominating. Folks, I'm telling you right now, the kids, when they're signing up to play ball, they want a good education. They also want to play basketball. They don't want to sit on the bench. And a lot of these mid-majors know that. And they're going to play their players. When Mariah played, my daughter played at Buffalo. Coach Jack, great coach up there in Buffalo. She played, 10 to 12 kids every game. So it's not just 7 or 8 guys or players. You're playing, a whole squad. And kids want to play. They want to be out on the court. You want to go to Ohio State and sit on the bench for 4 years and get paid, for your education? Great. That's great. But if you want to keep playing out of the high school, a lot of these smaller programs like Loyola Chicago, or Oral Roberts, you're going to play. So I give these kids credit, and all these folks that are in these bigger conferences and think that they're all great, they're not. And that's going to stay that way. And I wouldn't be surprised if one of these mid-majors finally, crosses that, gets to that point of a championship. So the other matchups we got, here's the other thing about the tournament this year, which is pretty cool. I've got, Chad out there in Kansas, loves the Pac-12. Loves Arizona. He's a big Arizona Wildcat fan. And he's been, we talked about it last week in the podcast, but we've got USC going up against Oregon. Now, Oregon got a pass in the first round because of some COVID issues with Virginia Commonwealth, I believe. So they got a pass. Then Oregon beat up, I'm trying to think who they beat pretty badly, but they get to play USC in their matchup. So whoever wins those 2 games between Gonzaga and Creighton and USC and Oregon will play each other. Then in the next matchups, you got Michigan against Florida State, our one remaining Big Ten program, who, is solid. They're a great team. They get to go up against Florida State, which I didn't think Florida State would make it this far. Florida State every year is kind of fickle. They maybe win a game, but they've won 2 now. So I got to give them some credit. I look for Michigan to win that game. UCLA. We're going to talk about, did you know, a little bit about the NCAA tournament at the end of the program, but UCLA is part of that little discussion of did you know. They're going to go up against Alabama. And Nate Oates, the former coach at Buffalo Bulls, he is now down at Alabama with the Crimson Tide. So they're going to go up against each other. Alabama is actually a 2 seed. I didn't realize that they got such a high seed. So that should be a good contest. UCLA has nothing to lose. They actually, UCLA, coming into the tournament, was on a 4-game skid before they got to the NCAA tournament. So I got to give props to the Pac-12. Other games, again, in the Sweet 16 include Baylor. Baylor's going to play Villanova. Villanova, always there. They've been, especially recently, got a championship a couple years ago. So Baylor, number 1 seed, up against Villanova. Arkansas is going up against Oral Roberts. Very interesting little tidbit of news here. Arkansas actually has a kid from the Columbus area, from Pickerington Central, named Jake Tate. Jalen Tate. Jalen Tate went to Pickerington Central, and he plays for the Arkansas Razorbacks. He's actually a graduate student. He used to play at Northern Kentucky, and has playing his final year of eligibility at Arkansas. So Arkansas, number 3 seed, really just a high-powered, fun team to watch defensively. They're going up against Oral Roberts. Who's to say Oral Roberts can't make it to the Elite Eight? Crazy how this could happen, but Oral Roberts is the number 15 seed. We'll see what happens. That game is on Saturday. The other matchups include Loyola, Chicago, Sister Jean, I believe, the nun from Loyola, Chicago. She's helping them go up against Oregon State and all the prayers. Oregon State, another team from the Pac-12. So again, Pac-12 is being represented strongly this year. And finally, the last game, we've got Syracuse up against Houston. Houston just, we're very close to being losing to Rutgers from the Big Ten, but of course Rutgers they stink. I mean, they're not good at anything. They had a big lead in that game against Houston in the second round of the tournament, and they blew it. Houston came back and won in the last minute. So Houston gets a game against Syracuse, and that zone defense that Syracuse is famous for. Used to practice that zone defense and a lot when I would coach, especially at the middle school level. We'd work on those, and we'd watch the Syracuse defense on video. But it should be good contest. I mean, Sweet 16, great moment for these schools, for these players. My Facebook feed today came up March 24th from 3 years ago. The Buffalo Bulls did make it to the Sweet 16. I've mentioned this on my podcast before. They got to play South Carolina on the women's side of the bracket. What a wonderful moment. What a time to capture that moment in history. The photos, I was looking at those photos again today, and just for a father like myself, it's probably maybe more meaningful than my child, Mariah, who actually played the game. It's neat to see those accomplishments as those kids move along. I want to give a shout out too to my stepson, Clay. Clay, who he works in wholesaling real estate. He had a really nice thing happen today with him and his crew that he works with, and so I want to congratulate Clay also. So lots of good tournament matchups this weekend, starting on Saturday and Sunday. There are 3 number 1 seeds still in the contest: Gonzaga, Michigan, and Baylor. Now, of those, like I mentioned before, there were 16 bids that went out to the Big 12 out there, like Kansas State, KU, and the Big 10. 16, and there are only 2 teams that are left, and that would be Michigan and Baylor. So the other squads that are represented, all sorts of different teams here. It's 4 teams. So a quarter of the tournament slots are taken up by the Pac-12. 1 team from the ACC, 1 team from the SEC, 3 Big East schools, which include Creighton, which Creighton used to be part of the Midwestern Valley Conference out there with Wichita State and teams like that, and Drake. So I don't ever consider Creighton like a Big East school, but I guess we have to because officially they are. But there's 1 from the American Athletic Conference, which would be Houston. There are 3 mid-major schools, including, like I mentioned earlier, Oral Roberts. And Gonzaga is always in that West Coast Conference. I'd like to know what Gonzaga would do if they joined the Pac-12 or something happened with the Pac-12, because they get a kind of a free ride there. They get to play all these teams like St. Mary's and other teams that are really terrible. Well, they're not terrible, but there's not the competition. So see what happens with that. So lots to look forward to. If you like basketball, I'm excited to see what happens over this weekend. So let's turn to the Brownies. The Browns, what a week, right? What a week. They kind of got started with free agency, and we weren't sure exactly who they were going to nab first, but John Johnson, the safety from the LA Rams, signed with the Brownies, and he's solid, and he's a leader. I've seen some I immediately, when I heard John Johnson, they did some video replay of him, and he reminds you a lot of Jarvis Landry on the offensive side of things. He's a talker, he's a communicator, he's a team leader. And that's just going to be such an excellent thing. The other person that they picked up later in the week, who's also a leader, is Anthony Walker, the linebacker who was playing for the Indianapolis Colts. He was a play caller there at Indy. So I look at that as like a double whammy bonus. I mean, you've got now John Johnson and Anthony Walker on the defensive side of things. I mean, if you're going to play that nickel defense of the Browns, Joe Woods, the defensive coordinator, is all excited about. I mean, you're looking at it, just one hell of a defense. The defense got so much better in the last week. Aren't you excited, Browns fans? Really? I mean, this is going to be great. Season tickets for the Browns. I know a lot of us Browns fans who got our season tickets notification, we're having to pay a little bit of extra funds. I know in my case, I think we have to pay an extra $300 or $400 for the tickets that I had already bought like a year ago that we never used because of the pandemic. So it should be fun. Hopefully we'll be able to be there in person. Hopefully we keep getting our COVID. Everybody, I encourage you to go out there and think about getting your COVID or your vaccine for the shots that are out there that are available. Of course, many of you know, I've got my shots a couple of weeks ago. Things are good. I haven't had any real major side effects. No crazy stuff, and so I know there are a lot of people out there that are concerned and want to wait, and I appreciate that, but I want you to consider getting that vaccine and helping getting America back open, right? So let's talk about the Browns, continue to talk about them a little bit. The Browns also picked up Malik Johnson, a defensive end. What I love about these players the Browns are picking up is that they have playoff and Super Bowl experiences. Folks, this is positive. This is great. The Browns had a hell of a season last year. If the defense had stepped up a little bit and it was a little bit better than we, had hoped it could be, especially our secondary, the Browns could have very well been there. And there's a lot of what ifs, but, having Malik Johnson, the other thing that I really love about these free agency signings right now is that Baker Mayfield, our leader, our signal caller for the Brownies, our great quarterback, doesn't get enough respect for this. All the players, Joe Johnson, Anthony Walker, Malik Johnson, they all mentioned that Baker Mayfield, our quarterback, the Brownies quarterback, reached out to them immediately when they got signed. That's a leader, folks. Baker Mayfield is a leader. He's bringing these guys in and saying, hey, we want to win. We're excited to have you. I thought that was really awesome. And I'm glad that those players shared that. And I, as a Browns fan, I would be super excited. Takk McKinley, the Browns did re-sign Malik Smith. And of course, the Browns signed Rashard Hollywood Higgins. They also re-signed JoJo Natson, our little speedster, to run back maybe punt returns and kickoffs. If you recall, JoJo Natson was injured like the first game of the season a year ago. The Browns also re-signed our kicker. I know you're all excited about this, Browns fans. Cody Parquet. I'll never forget leaving the Baltimore Browns Monday night game last season and the number of crazy, delusional fans. I mean, you're rightfully upset, but they were all like, oh, I hate Cody Parkey. Get rid of Cody Parkey. Well, the Browns re-signed Cody Parkey. Now, just a little twist of things. Rashard Higgins, the Browns, Andrew Berry is just phenomenal. I got to give props to him, right? You guys have got to give props to Andrew Berry. He's doing a hell of a job in free agency. You look at Rashard Higgins' contract. He signed this new contract for $2.3 million. Rashid Hollywood Higgins is a great addition to help the Browns get to the Super Bowl. But then you look at other teams and what the lousiness of these other teams, and you have to respect what the Browns are doing. I mentioned this before. There's a player named Kenny Golladay. All right. Maybe you've heard of him. Maybe you haven't. To be honest, I really haven't heard of him. Is he is he a Jerry Rice? No. Is he, he's not. It's not your common name of a receiver. Kenny Golladay. He played for the Detroit Lions. Well, the New York Giants are so freaking desperate. They signed him to a contract for $18 million a year, a receiver for the New York Giants. Are you kidding me? It's absolutely absurd. I mentioned that on social media a week ago, and some guy, I don't know who he is, said, "Oh, do you watch football? You got to give props to Kenny Golladay." I do? Really? He played for the Detroit Lions, and he's a decent player, but he signed for $18 million, and Andrew Berry signed Rashad Hollywood Higgins for $2.3 million. Folks, that's 9 times less than Golladay. I think the Browns are winning in the department of signing players. You know why the players are signing too with the Browns? Because they want to play for a winner, and the Browns are winning, folks. And you know it, and I know it. And isn't it exciting? I'm excited to see what happens next season. I know it's not going to be all roses and cupcakes. It's going to be tough, folks. And the Browns had a hell of a season this last year, a lot of expectations. But it's fun to have these players. It's fun to see these players want to come to Cleveland again. It certainly reminds me of a time that I remember when I was a kid in the 80s and the 90s, when Bernie Kosar and all those players were doing so many great things and getting so close. We're going to do it again, folks. We're going to do it again. So just a couple more things here. Let's jump to our final segment. Well, the other thing before I leave to the final segment, the other news this afternoon in the world of free agency for the Browns is that Jadeveon Clowney, the first-round pick formerly of the Houston Texans back in 2014, he visited Cleveland today. So it's sparked a lot of conversation that he was in Cleveland. Would he sign with the Browns? The Browns have pursued Jadeveon Clowney since last year, and Jadeveon Clowney signed with the Tennessee Titans and played 8 games halfway through the season last year and didn't record a sack, but had a decent season. Some people don't want to give him that respect, but he's a very good player. He was outstanding. He was the number 1 pick back in 2014. He's 28 years old. He doesn't turn 29 until February. If he came to Cleveland, you're playing him opposite Myles Garrett. You don't think he'd be a little bit motivated? I mean, we got to see if he can pass his physical, and sounds like he will still have to pass a physical. But it's certainly in the media realm today, it sounded like he was interested in Cleveland. He was here visiting Cleveland. They said that he did not sign a contract yet. But, you want to play on a potential Super Bowl winner, the Cleveland Browns. Jadeveon Clowney is a smart guy. I'm sure he is. Let's see what he does. If he signs with the Browns, awesome. If he goes somewhere else, okay. But the Browns have some more things that we can do. The other thing to think about in the future here, by the way, the draft, the Browns, the NFL draft is coming up from Cleveland along the shores of Lake Erie. Oh, I'm so excited. Aren't you? They're going to be inviting friends, fans to the draft. So I'm looking forward to going. Hopefully I can go. Hopefully you can go. But that draft starts April 29th. The Browns have the number 26 pick. I know some folks today were talking about, well, do the Browns take the pick at 26? Do they move down? And honestly, with all the free agency movement in the last week for the Browns don't necessarily have to take somebody at 26. They can move down, build up on some picks for the future. Maybe not this year, but maybe in the few years to come. Isn't it nice to have people in charge that are running the Browns who are doing one hell of a job? I'm excited. I think you should be too. All right, let's finish with this. Did you know? Did you know? This is a fun segment. I thought we'd tie it back to our Sweet 16 moments in NCAA basketball, especially on the men's side. So let's start with this. So I went back and I said, I was wondering, did you know how many teams, what teams have made it to the most Sweet 16 tournaments in the past? And we kind of talked about this in the last podcast when I had the coaches on from Kansas. That is one of the schools. So did you know that I'll start at the bottom here. I'll just give you the number 4 at the most Sweet 16 tournaments to go to is Duke at number 4. Number 3 is North Carolina, the Tar Heels. And number 2 is the UCLA, the Bruins. And number 1, anybody know? Do you know? Yes, it is the Kentucky Wildcats. All right, so those are the top teams. But it was interesting to see some of the other schools that are at that moment. Kentucky has been in 44 Sweet 16s. Then it drops down to UCLA, 34. North Carolina drops. They have the same at 34. Duke has 31 appearances at the Sweet 16. Then it goes to Kansas, also at 31. Then it drops down to Louisville, then Syracuse. They're both at 24. And the biggest school with the most appearances in the Big Ten is Indiana. Michigan is next. Arizona, the Pac-12. Coach Chad would be happy. They have 19 appearances in the Sweet 16. Then it drops down to Villanova. And surprisingly, the Big 12 representative K-State Wildcats, yes, from Manhattan, Kansas, they're actually number 12 on the list with 17 appearances, which I thought was pretty interesting. Further down the list, which is pretty cool too, on the list at 21 is the San Francisco Dons. Have you ever heard of San Francisco Dons going to the Sweet 16 tournament recently? No. But did you know that back in the 1950s and the early 70s, when in the 50s, Bill Russell played for the San Francisco Dons, and then Bill Cartwright played for the San Francisco Dons in the 1970s. And they, between those years in the 50s and the 70s, they were especially dominating San Francisco, that they went to 12 Sweet 16s. Now, they have not been to a Sweet 16 since 1974. And that was about the time that they things started changing in the NCAA was 1985. And I didn't realize this. So did you know that before 1985, really all the way up to the NCAA tournament started let's backtrack here. The tournament started in 1939. It was at that point there were 8 teams that were invited to the tournament. Only 8 teams. So then in 1951 season, the NCAA opened the tournament up to 16 teams, and the following season in 52, they actually opened up the season to that season. They opened up to teams for about 22 to 25 teams. In 1975, they then opened it up to 32 teams, and then 1985 is when they opened it up to the 64 team format that we are all familiar with. So those of you who follow college sports might find this interesting. So since 1985, the leader in the house for the most appearances is actually Duke. The Duke Blue Devils that Coach Lang, Isaiah out there in Kansas will be happy to hear this. Duke has 25 appearances in the Sweet 16. Now, overall, Duke has 31 appearances. North Carolina is number 2. They have 23 appearances. And number 3 is Kansas with 21 appearances. They originally had 31 appearances since 1939, but they have 21 since 1985. So there's, Kentucky, by the way, who's number 1 on the list with 44 appearances. They've had 21 appearances like Kansas since 1985. Teams like Arizona, 17 of their 19 appearances have happened since 1985. Then you have other teams in the Big 12 schedule. Michigan State has 16. Louisville has 14. Connecticut has 14. Syracuse and UCLA both have 14. So I don't see a lot of other Big Ten schools in there, do you? You know, so this conversation I talked about at the beginning of the podcast with all these bickering, Big Ten proponents about, oh, our players are tired. Listen, the Big Ten is not, you can say all you want. They beat each other up when they're playing in their conference, whatever you want, but they're not a basketball powerhouse. The conference is not a basketball powerhouse. And certainly Ohio State, the Buckeyes are not a powerhouse. I know I live in Columbus, and I know if you're listening to this podcast and you're from Columbus, you're probably a little PO'd with that comment, but it's true. And you want to argue about it, go back and look at the history of the NCAA tournament. The Pac-12 is doing mightily well this season. There's 4 teams. Look to see if any of them can get into the final this year. So there you go. Did you know? Well, folks, I hope you had a great evening. Thank you for joining the podcast tonight. We will come to you later this week. We'll probably do our next podcast maybe outside. It's been a beautiful weather here in Columbus. I mean, we're talking 60s and 70 degrees, so I might be up on my patio next time for our next podcast. But again, thank you for joining the show. Look forward to talking to you next time. And remember, everybody, to keep smiling. Take care.